Hey guys, welcome to Ask Earl Anything, number 14, not 5, 14. Thanks for being here today. We got a few questions, and I'm going to try to run right through them. And remember, this whole show is based on you guys asking questions, so the more questions you ask, the longer the show is. And if I only have a few questions, and they're great questions, that's awesome too. We'll have a great show that way. My first question comes from Lone Star, and Lone Star says, how and when can we submit questions? So Lone Star, you're starting the show off. I'm talking about questions for the next show. The way you submit questions and the way you get on the show is you watch the show and then you write a question in my comments section. I usually answer you back. Can I use it for the next show? And that's how it works. And then I put it on my iPad or I write it on a piece of paper and I answer your question. Simple as that. But you didn't send me another question, I don't think, unless you're one of the questions I found in one of my other videos. I do that occasionally. The next question comes from T. Tekken Drums. That's what it is. Tekken Drums. Hey, Mr. Bennett. I'd like to know what you do if you need to reduce the weight of your drum gear using vintage hardware or something. Can you talk about ear protection, please, too? Thanks for your work. Take care. Let's talk about lightening the load of your drum hardware. What are some of the options? Now, there is some great new lightweight hardware that Pearl makes, or DW makes, or Tama makes that's more in the vintage style of drum hardware with the flat bass stands. And if you're one of those guys that wants to try that type of hardware, and feels that you're not going to knock cymbals over, that's great. I mean, the new Tama hardware that they made for Peter Erskine is pretty much the old Ludwig hardware, but just better. Tama took the old Ludwig hardware, tubing sizes, everything, tilters with teeth in them and everything, and they basically put in better nylon bushings to make them quieter, and they made it so it's a little more stable. And they're charging almost the amount of money as a big, one of these stands that you see on my kit. If you notice anything about my hardware is basically a mishmash of PDP, Gibraltar, old Yamaha, anything that fits in 7/8 tubing pretty much, anything that has this kind of nice gnarled boom. That's pretty much what I use. I spend my money on my hardware and my pedals. I have a decent Pearl hi-hat stand. I have a decent DW hi-hat stand. And I have some Tama Iron Cobra pedals and a Tama Camco pedal and a couple other pedals. I have a bunch of pedals hanging around. I did that pedal video about all my pedals. And some of them are mine, some of them are my son-in-law's, but because he keeps some of his drums here. But as far as lightening the load, a few years back, Sonar used to make an aluminum, really lightweight stand, kind of like lighting stands that I have behind me, behind the camera. I don't know how well they stood up. I don't think they make them anymore. They probably dented all over the place. So if you really want to lighten your load, you might want to use multi-clamps. I don't use a lot of multi-clamps on my kit in the studio, but every once in a while I'll put a multi-clamp and an arm off of it. So that's another way of lightening the load. Racks don't really lighten the load. They're just bulky to carry around, and they're hard to set up if you have to take them all the way apart to fit in your car. Now if you got a van, you can throw it in the van and keep it assembled. It's a little bit easier. I have found for lightweight stands, the old Yamaha 500 series, I have a bunch of those from the 80s. They're lightweight stands, but everyone's got a single braced tripod stand, and I find the single base tripod stand with a nice boom in it, kind of works for me, and they're lighter than the double braced tripod stands. So usually the single brace stands by Tama, Mapex, Yamaha. I don't know if DW's got one. They used to have one a long time ago. But a single brace stand with it that's a little bit lighter, those stands work better for me. hardware cases. The other thing is you might want to split your hardware into a couple different cases to make it easier and lighten the load as far as carrying it. And I teach safety too. So lift with the legs, not with your back. So you don't want to bend over and pick it up with your back. You want to literally get down and lift with your legs. Just went out a camera shot. I'm sure of that. Anyhow, a couple tips for helping your back stay around. The other question was hearing protection. What do I do for hearing protection? Well, when I'm practicing my studio, I've had these blue gun muffs for about 25 years. I've even gotten to the point where I've taped the fraying plastic earpieces. And put that there for now. Put that there for now. Alright, so this is kind of how I practice. I practice with these headphones on. Now, this is a set of, they're about 20 dB down, really cheapies. Very least, you can put these on. They're not as good as these. These are about 25, 30 dB down. But even something as cheap as these, I bought it at the dollar store. I bought them for my grandson so he'd have something to wear when we're jamming in here. They will protect your ears a little bit. I also use in-ear monitors that go right in the ear, and I keep the monitor volume down as low as I can get away with whenever I'm working through an Avion system or an in-ear monitoring system in church or here in the studio. And believe it or not, these really cheap CAD MH310 headphones have great isolation for drums. So truthfully, there's isolation in these. So whenever you're recording with headphones in a studio for drums, you want to have a closed ear headphone. One that's closed around your ears so it actually locks the sound from getting in and out of your headphones. And there's two reasons for that. One is you want it for the purposes of keeping the sound in so you can keep the sound controlled and get a good mix in your headphone. And the other thing is you don't want the sound to get out, meaning the click track that you might be recording to get up into your overheads. So I guess that was a headphone ear protection kind of lesson. You can use those little rubbery things. I find that when I'm playing a live gig with wedge monitors, I try to keep the wedge monitors as low a volume as I can get away with and still hear myself. I don't use hearing protection on a live gig usually because it's too annoying. But in the studio when I'm practicing, I usually have ear protection. So that's what I use for ear protection, gun muffs. There's also some great headphones like Direct Sound makes headphones, Metrophones make headphones. Vic Firth has got a new version of their headphone. I haven't used it yet, but their old version's terrible. And there's a company called, it's Gordy Knutson's company, GK Audio. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I think they call them Superphones. They're really good isolation headphones. So there's lots of choices out there, places you can get headphones that'll be that ear protection. You want to get 20 to 30 dB down when you're practicing. But I always recommend practicing with ear protection. Keep your headphone volumes as low as possible. So, all right, the next question. This comes from Drumman190, my friend William. Do you see yourself posting any vlog style type videos in the future, such as showing us you at a gig? Haven't thought about that. It's a possibility. I do have a gig this weekend with my band, the Swigs. I did a couple of their songs as covers this year. And we're planning on doing some filming of that gig. But as far as a vlog style, meaning every week doing a vlog, I think this is as close to a vlog as I come doing Ask Earl Anything. I mean, we've done actually now, this is the 13th segment of it. So this is kind of my weekly communication to my subscribers and trying to answer your questions. I'll also continue to do drum talks about my influences and things like that. So, but maybe I can branch out and do some other things. It's all about taking a camera someplace and shooting some video, I think. But great question, William. I'll have to consider that. Right now, as you all know, putting out drum videos and doing this, drum covers and doing this is pretty much my video output for the week, and I seem to have a lot of output, so as I'm chugging towards that 1,000 subscriber mark. The next question comes from drummer Jeff, who used to be known as Jeff Holden, and he says, what's your preferred head type for each of your drums, all kits, snares, and what is your tuning process for each of your drums from seating to fine tuning? Okay, as far as head preference, I like all kinds of heads, okay? Currently, this kit's got Emperor coateds on the toms, ambassadors on the bottom. That's kind of a good starting point. I like the sound of coated ambassadors with a clear ambassador on the bottom of the toms. My concert tom kit, I use just about any head, and a lot of you guys like to beat me up about the concert tom kit having all mismatched heads. The reason for that really is the 15-inch tom. Finding a 15-inch tom head is not easy at any store. I found one once. It's a coated Emperor, and that's the only 15-inch head I own, and it stays on that drum. And I have a whole bunch of coated Emperors for that kit, but I kind of dig the clear sound on the concert tom kit. As far as snare drums go, controlled sound X heads or controlled sound which is coated with a dot on the bottom, Remos, I like a lot. For bass drum heads, I like EMAD heads, but to be honest, the last head I bought for this Gretsch kit, which was just a couple weeks ago, I didn't feel like spending $50 on an EMAD head at Guitar Center, or $47 on an EMAD head. And they had a white coated ambassador bass drum head. I've never bought a white coated ambassador bass drum head. I believe this bass drum came with one originally, because the Gretsch Permatone heads back in the 70s were really Remo ambassador heads. So I had two Gretsch Permatone heads on this drum the day I bought it, and that was coated ambassador on the top and the bottom of all the toms. So that was the only day I had that, and then I eventually bought a pinstripe or a hydraulic head. Or I've had all kinds of bass drum heads. I mean, I've tried just about every drum company's head you can possibly try, including Canasonic, which is old 70s calf style heads, fiber skin heads. I even tried the earth tone heads. I even had one of those for a snare drum to kind of get that kind of calf-like sound on it. I don't think it's calf, I think it's goat, to be honest. But right now I've got a white coated ambassador on this bass drum. Now this bass drum has been used in the last bunch of videos for the last 2 weeks. So Eminence Front from The Who was using this bass drum. I believe I even used it for Imagine, the song that I got a lot of response to right before this is coming out, or almost close to when this is coming out. But I've got this bass drum, this little 20-inch bass drum stuffed with a pillow. So that's kind of how I'm getting my sound right now off of it. It's not wide open. When it's wide open, I like an EMAD head on it. Usually my front head is usually a coated ambassador, but I have been using some Aquarian heads on the front of my bass drums. Of course, on the concert tom kit, which is kind of off to the side here in the video, probably it's a clear head right now. On the front, and the back is a pin. Actually, I think it might be a dot head, a CS dot head. I don't care what heads I use. I have a preference. I'm developing a preference towards ambassadors, believe it or not. Thinner cymbals and thinner heads. But I think that's because I've learned how to pull a tone and tune a drum better. As far as what works on just about any drum, it's coated Emperors. Coated Emperors work on any drum. I find them to be the best, most versatile head, and they'll last longer. Okay? But if you're a hard hitter, you want to go something thicker, like Emperors. Now, Evans. I've used Evans heads. G2s I like. G1s I don't. I've tried their etched head once. I don't like their pinstripe equivalent head. I forget what they call those heads. EC2s. I don't like them. I really don't like those heads for some reason. They just don't sound good to me. Love their EMAD heads. And for a snare drum, a coated CS or a coated CSX head is perfect. I've used ambassadors. I've used Emperors. I've used the Aquarian Modern Vintage heads. I actually had a set of Aquarian Modern Vintage on this drum kit for months last fall when I was doing a lot of drum covers. They sound great. You know, the modern vintage heads. The deep vintage heads are a little deep. And I think I said this not too long ago too, that I really like the vintage ambassador heads a lot. And I've had them on a drum kit. I had them on my Noble Cooley kit when I had that kit. I gave that kit back. So, anyhow, Jeff, I'm all over the place with the heads, but I like heads. It's just a matter of buying them, that's all. How often do I change them? Not often. Now, how do you tune a head? When it's brand new, I will basically tune it down. I'll do like the normal, crisscross tuning usually, but that's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes I'll go around. I won't go all the way down on a head until I'm getting ready to do the crisscross. Like sometimes when I'm putting the head on the drum, I may go all around the drum, like lug to lug, but it won't be all the way down. Once it's getting ready to be seated on the bearing edge, then I'll tighten down 2, go across 2, go across 2, go across 2, go across 2, listen to it, do it again, and then I'll push into the head a lot of times. You get the crack of the glue, because that's what you got to do on Remo heads, and then tighten it all, maybe even tighten it all the way up, and then back it all the way down, just so it gets kind of put on. But there's no hard fast rule on that for me. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. If I'm reseating a head, I just learned a trick on reseating the head. It sounds ridiculous, by the way, but it actually kind of works. I tried it on the little Gretsch kit. Is when you reseat the head, you put the head on the tom, and then you blow air into the hole. Sounds crazy, I know. Putting your mouth on your drums to blow air in the hole. But it actually it put tension inside the shell, which popped the drum head back up, and it made tuning that drum up a lot easier. Okay? Now if you have lots of big holes in your drums, it may not work as well, but it worked pretty well on the floor tom. The floor tom doesn't have any other extra holes. I've got extra holes in these drums because this originally had pearl tom mounts drilled to the shell back in 1979. I went to rims mounts back in the late 80s after I did a recording session in Nashville and a record in Nashville. The drums I had played in Nashville, you could tell the difference between the rims mounts or the tom mount stuck in the tom. So anyhow, I'm a big proponent of rims mounts to get that, singing sound. Whenever you've got a tom arm that's stuck in the shell going through it, it kind of mutes the shell a little bit and it doesn't resonate as much. I will say the same thing about putting it in a snare basket. Snare basket, like I've got over there right now, it's in a snare basket. It doesn't really sound as good as when it's just on the rims mount. So I'm a big proponent of rims mounts. I like them on my toms. I just put them on my concert toms now. So I'm actually going to try to use the concert toms a little bit more. Anyhow, Jeff, hope that answers the question. And my last question. This comes from 2112 Drums. Who are the top 3 drummers who inspired you? Now, I answered 2112 on the site, and I said this. This is a very hard question, but Danny Serafin is number 1 from Chicago. All right? And I said I would answer the other 2 after having a few days to think about this. So let's talk about influences. One of the things I'm doing on my Facebook page right now is I'm doing these 10 albums. It's supposed to be your 10 favorite albums. That's an impossible question, by the way. There's absolutely no way I can give you 10 favorite albums. Okay? So what I did was, I took Drumman 190, asked me to do this. I said, I will answer this as this way. My 10 albums that influenced me to become a drummer. Okay? And my number 1 album for influencing me to become a drummer was Chicago's Greatest Hits. That was the first Chicago album I bought, with Danny Serafin playing drums on all the hit songs from Chicago, from CTA all the way to Chicago 8. Because that was Chicago 9, they used to call it, Chicago's Greatest Hits. So, Chicago Greatest Hits just has the hits on it. My favorite Chicago album is not Chicago's Greatest Hits. It's probably Chicago 5, maybe 6. I like those 2 a lot. Those are two of my favorite Chicago albums. and I love their live album, Live in Japan, which is an import album that I had as a kid. I spent $30 for an album. That's when a double album for $30 was a lot of money. Not like today when you want to buy turntable albums. I'm talking about vinyl. Okay, and today you'll spend $30 to get a single album of Back in Black or something stupid like that, you know, AC/DC, because they reissued it again. They're making more money on that same thing. It's been reissued as album. It's been reissued as a CD, as a tape, as an 8-track tape. It's downloaded, streaming, and now they're reissuing it on vinyl. They're making more money. The only people who are making any money in the music industry is classic rock artists. Okay, especially the guys that actually bought their catalog back. So Chicago was smart enough to buy their catalog a long time ago. They bought their whole catalog back as a band, so they're making all their money off their hits. This is just an aside. I don't know if you've ever listened to Spotify or Pandora, but you know, if you listen to Pandora free and you put in James Taylor's name, what you get is a lot of live James Taylor performances. You ever wonder why? Why they're not playing, you know, from some of his first albums? You know what I mean? JT or one of those other ones from the beginning of his career. The reason why they're not doing that is because he's not making the money off of that. So he's basically got to deal with Pandora. If you search my name, put in my live stuff. It's crazy. The guys that make the first albums aren't making all the money off. They're still getting writing credits and things like that, but as far as like produce the album, it's not theirs. See what I'm saying? It's quite a little game. But anyhow, back to influences. The two other influences. Danny Seraphine's #1. Oh, let me go back to my 10 albums. So if you're on Facebook, you're a Facebook friend of mine, you can see my 10 favorite albums, okay, that influenced me to become a drummer. And it's really a chronological history of the first thing that made me really want to be a drummer, where I started, and then my journey in college and my journey of musical tastes. Okay, so it's kind of interesting if you guys want to see another side of me. As far as influences go, #1's Danny Seraphine. My second greatest influence, and this is really hard. It's really hard to pick a guy because really I've already done a bunch of influence videos. But I would say it's a session drummer, you know. And it's hard for me to say Steve Gadd, but I'm going to say Steve Gadd for one reason. Steve Gadd is one of the most versatile drummers in the world. Steve Gadd could play a disco tune like The Hustle, Van McCoy's The Hustle, and be on that #1 record. He could be recording with the Bee Gees, okay? He could be recording with Carly Simon or Paul Simon. He's on so many albums that I love, okay? But he also plays some mean jazz. And you listen to him with Chick Corea, okay, or playing on a lot of the CTI records from the 70s he played on. He can play straight ahead jazz, he can play funk, he can play R&B. He's played with some of the greatest musicians, Al Jarreau, Grover Washington Jr., GPR All-Stars. He did a lot of those tours back when GPR Records was happening. He did some of those things. He's just a great musician. So Steve Gadd's probably #2. And you can see it in my playing sometimes when I play some of the roll-y kind of things on the snare drums and stuff. That's kind of a Steve Gadd implying the rudiments kind of thing. And I guess my third influence is another session musician, and I would say it's probably Jeff Porcaro, you know, to be honest. The simplicity of Jeff Porcaro, who plays for the song. And Gadd plays for the song too, okay? So you got an LA guy, you got a New York guy. Now, there's a lot of honorable mentions here, people I'm missing. Because there's guys that influence Gadd, like Rick Marotta. You know, you wouldn't think Rick Marotta influenced Steve Gadd, but he did. When Steve Gadd was coming up in the session thing in New York, Rick Marotta took him under his wings, and I think Rick Marotta helped him to see the importance of playing less. You know? So Rick Marotta is an influence of mine through Steve Gadd, and through the records he's played on. I mean, he's played on some great records. James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt stuff, Warren Zevon. He even played on a Michael Jackson album I found this week. I was reading about him in Modern Drummer. So, session musicians are guys that really always spoke to me. So when we talk about Jeff Porcaro, it's not just Jeff. Jeff comes through the lineage of Jim Keltner and Hal Blaine, you know, Earl Palmer, you know, who's the other funk drummer I'm thinking of? Oh gosh, I can't believe I'm blowing this, but he's an incredible funk drummer. James Gadson. I mean, Jeff would say James Gadson's one of his influences. Okay, so you've got Jim Keltner, James Gadson, Jim Gordon, Hal Blaine, Earl Palmer are all influences of Jeff Porcaro. So those become influences of me too. And Jeff influenced guys like Vinnie Colaiuta to be studio guys. I mean, Vinnie had the chops and everything, but Vinnie didn't have the discipline of a studio guy when he first went to town. You know, they weren't hiring him for stuff early on. They thought he was Zappa's drummer. Being Zappa's drummer is pretty amazing, but doesn't get you studio work where you're playing with Barbra Streisand and Melissa Manchester and, you know, whoever else, you know, Michael McDonald. It doesn't get you that kind of level of groove drumming thing. And Vinnie had to get somebody around town to basically say, hey, hire this guy. He's worth it. He can do this stuff too. Trust me. And Jeff was one of the guys that pushed Vinnie's name around early on. Vinnie would tell you that. So Jeff has influenced a lot of other players, and Jeff has a lot of influences. See what I'm saying? So my three guys, Danny Seraphine, just because he's my first #1 guy. Steve Gadd, because he's the New York session drummer and plays jazz and goes further than just being a pop rock drummer. By the way, Jeff could do it too. Most of these guys I'm talking about can play anything, by the way. Playing anything was the goal of a musician back when I was starting. It wasn't to be Thomas Lang, even though if you really want to look at Thomas Lang's history as a drummer, he's an incredible session drummer too. He just built up his chops, but he's played on some really interesting, I think he played on that song Amadeus, what was it? Was it Mozart Amadeus? Amadeus. Thomas Lang played drums on that. Is that crazy or what? But Thomas Lang would even tell you, you know, he's influenced by these guys. But today, drumming's like kind of like extracurricular physical activity, just playing as much stuff as you can possibly play. I've always looked for pocket guys. Probably one of the best is Russell Kunkel. Russ Kunkel's, forget it. He should be on my list too. You see, it's hard for me to pick names of one guy that influences me. But these guys all are collectively influencing each other, and they made some of the greatest records in history. A better question is, what new guys are influencing me? That's the hard thing, to find some new guys that are really influencing me. Spud from Snarky Puppy. I can never play like Spud, but boy oh boy, he's a great drummer. He's got some really cool ideas what he does with the kit. Mark Juliana, again, polyrhythmic stuff. I'm working off the top of my head like I always do anyhow. But drumming influences, you gotta listen to lots of stuff. That's all I'm gonna tell you. Listen to lots of players. Tony Royster Jr. Incredible drummer, Tony Royster Jr. Pocket, he could play hip hop. I remember when Tony Royster did a drum clinic I was at, he was like 13 years old. Killing it at 13 years old. Man, there are some great players. I wonder sometimes why I have a YouTube channel, really. But the reason why is because guys like you are guys like me, and we like to relate to one another too and realize that there's places to go. So my encouragement to all of you is, if you want to do this and you want to keep doing this, listen to lots of music. And make it your goal to listen to as much music as you possibly can. And expose yourself to other styles of music. I don't know if you realize it this week, one of my favorite new guys, I forgot this, Benny Greb. My gosh, Benny Greb is more than just a clinician drummer. He just did a whole album playing Buddy Rich big band music. I mean, it's incredible his playing on this album. I saw some YouTube clips of it. Look up Benny Greb big band, and he is swinging the heck out of it. Okay, doing the closing. I lost a lot of it, so I'm probably cutting a lot of this out. Thank you for watching Ask Earl Anything. Please leave your comments. Please like my video. Please subscribe to my channel. and hit the video at the end to find out how you can win the symbol once I hit 1,000 subscribers. I just said something at the end I want to say about that about the symbol I'm giving away. If you look in the fine print, there's a clause in there. It says I will ship up to 25 bucks. I'll put 25 bucks into the shipping and shipping that symbol, okay? So that's the rule about the symbol, okay? I'll put up to 25 bucks. So it's probably not going to make it around the world, but it is a 20-inch deep Zildjian deep ride symbol. So I'm giving that away. Anyhow, thank you for watching Ask Earl Anything. Please leave your comments and subscribe and like, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Have a great day. Bye.